Well, this video might get a little bit spicy, but we'll see where it goes. I want to talk about Glock failures, drop tests, a lot of stuff mainly relating to Glock. So, like I said, I might have a few spicy takes because, well, that Johnny Glock video is making the rounds on the internet, and it's pretty easy to poo-poo someone else's product when their trigger is as good or better maybe than the one you offer. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying it's a little bit sus. First thing I want to talk about is the Overwatch precision issue I had with the trigger. Man, I'm going to be completely real. So I'm pretty good at following directions and assessing issues. I'm very patient with that kind of stuff. So as far as tinkering, moving parts around, seeing how something works or doesn't work, trying the variables, all that kind of stuff. But like this is dragging, or this is causing this, or this interferes with this, I'm okay at, but I'm not the most knowledgeable person out there. Sometimes I'll just go to the internet, phone a friend, or YouTube if I have a question about something that's interfacing that I don't feel is right or an issue to troubleshoot. So, like I said, I'm okay at this stuff, not the best. No, but maybe not the worst. So, got a lot of questions about the Overwatch trigger that I said's failing or needs to get swapped out. Kind of like the general consensus is, how is the trigger responsible for light strikes? The bar releases a striker from the same position as a stock trigger bar. I'm either wrong or you're wrong. Please explain. We might both be wrong. I don't really know. So I'm just going to talk through kind of the process, what happened, and then I've got the parts here for you to look at. So what I did was the gun had maybe 5,000-ish rounds through it already. With that trigger installed, the 4.5-pound Wolf striker spring, and the only thing else that's been changed is just that trigger, shoe, and bar. I believe the rest of the gun's factory and looking it over. So shot it a little bit after, well, so I had like 5,000 rounds through it. Since I had this trip coming up, cleaned it a bit, just a rough cleaning, make sure everything looks okay, put it back together, shot it a few hundred rounds just to verify zero, the gun's working okay, and that kind of stuff. Then afterwards, the gun started to light hit. About every 100 rounds, it seems like it was one. If you rack the round in the chamber, you'd see a dimple in the primer. It didn't look really light. I mean, it looked like a good enough hit, you'd think, just looking at it, like, yeah, that would set it off, but clearly it wasn't. So I ended up changing out. I thought maybe the striker spring was just too light, even though like it'd been fine. I had the same striker spring in the other gun I was shooting, which I've got with me also. No issues, but I decided let's just give that a try. So I took the 4.5-pound out, put in a factory striker spring. I kind of looked it over while I had it out. The striker didn't feel like it was dragging in that channel. No excess like gunk or anything. It all seemed to be put together correctly. But again, I'm just doing this on a little range in a range. I'm doing this on a little table at a range, so there always could be stuff I missed. But kind of just looking it over and seeing how the striker traveled to that channel, it all seemed reasonable. So I swiped out the striker spring and got him back to shooting. These guns were loners, by the way, so a couple different guys shooting them, and so then the gun started still light hitting, probably once a day, once or twice a day it would happen. So I'm like, this is pretty unacceptable. So it was good enough to finish the class, but anyway, it just needs to get addressed. So what I've done is I pulled out the striker from that gun, compared it to the trigger that was in that gun when I bought it. I'm pretty artistic, so I keep the same stuff in the box. If there's aftermarket stuff in and out, it all stays in that box. That way I could restore it to exactly the way it came from factory if I wanted to. So this is the Overwatch precision trigger I was sent. I didn't pay for this. And looking at their website, this looks to be called TAC Trigger for Glock. Looks like it's $135. So the trigger shoe, the bar, and looking at it, it looks to be their bar. The way I'm telling the difference is this one groove along the side. I pulled the original groove, the original trigger and connector that were in the factory gun. I noticed this one has two grooves. I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but if you look on the top, there's a number 5. Whatever. Anyway, on the top of this one, the little, I call it cruciform, I think. This has got a bunch of numbers, so a Glock part number is what I assume it is anyway. 39701. So I assume that's Glock's part number. But like I said, that part number on the top, the grooves on the side makes me think this one is not, or this one is the factory, obviously, that this one is from Overwatch. Look through the website. It looks like they have one they called tuned trigger bars for Glocks. They're $15. I'm guessing that's what it is. Maybe not. But anyway, looks to be one of theirs and not the factory one. So what I have planned is to put this guy back in the gun. I'm not going to tear apart the top end anymore and just go shoot it, because before flying home the next day after classes at Nick's range, we fired maybe like 2 magazines through the gun back after I had the reduced power back in it, and it already did a light strike. So I'm just going to put the factory trigger and trigger bar back in it, leave everything else the same. That's the way my brain works. It seems the most logical. Just shoot it a little bit and see if within 100 rounds if I get a light hit or not. If I don't, then I think it's safe to assume something with the trigger or trigger bar or geometry was the issue. But if it's fine for 100 rounds, I could always put this bad boy back in it and see if it's fine then, and maybe something got misaligned, some tolerance stacking, somewhere along those lines. So it's tough to say. For me, I do a lot of just trial and error, because if I know it's not working in one configuration, if I change connector, trigger bar, and all the springs, and it starts working, I don't really know what the problem was. So in my brain, it makes the most sense just to put the OEM trigger and trigger bar back in and see what happens. So like I said, I'm not a gunsmith. I try to just cause and effect and just, again, observe and see what happens. Otherwise, the 4.5 pound Wolf Striker springs have been good in my other guns, in Mr. Steger's guns. This is the other gun that got shot a bunch. This is a 47 with the tactical trigger Glock. This one was felt kind of gritty. All I did was when I got it home, I just add a little oil to it and stuff, and the trigger feels as good as it did originally. So it was just maybe a little bit dry. But anyway, after I oiled it up, it still feels fine. No issues with this gun. I don't think it was this. Oh, the other part I should mention, there was 4 guns total being pulled from the same lot of ammunition. So each of the guns fired about 3,000 to 4,000 rounds in 4 days. So I'll call it roughly 1,000 rounds a day per gun, maybe a little bit less. So if the ammunition would have been a problem, I would have assumed we would have saw it in more guns, and we didn't see that issue. It was just that one gun. So again, kind of just trying to narrow things down to be the smartest about testing stuff. Otherwise, this gun with the tac trigger, or tactical trigger, I like this one quite a fair bit. Keep getting asked questions. Well, I'll go through some of the comments a little bit, but one of the comments is what my favorite trigger would be. At this point, probably either the tactical trigger or I really like the Apex. The Apex, for no other reason than just the shoe. Kind of the flat wall, it's a wider face, and I feel like it's just easy to press the trigger straight back and kind of... So here's the problem, in my opinion, or why I don't like the Glock trigger as much. If I get good angles, maybe. It's not really straight. It's kind of more... It feels more triangular. So if you're trying to push or trying to apply pressure straight back on a triangle, it's a little bit tougher than if it was on... The trigger was at a flat face, like this tactical trigger. This just makes it, in my opinion, if I can get a good angle, easier to apply pressure straight back. So that's why I prefer the flat face, the triggers, even if the weight's the same as OEM, and I can still shoot an OEM trigger just fine. But if I had to pick one, probably at this point, either the tactical trigger or the Apex would be the two that are my choice. Next, bunch of comments and people going quite crazy about the Trigger Tech Ace trigger. So let's talk about a few things. First off, yeah, it's not legal for USPSA, apparently due to some safety issues. I don't think that's related at all to the Johnny Glock's trigger. One, I mean, I know it's unkind to say Troy isn't capable of that kind of testing. He wouldn't know unless somebody told him. But I think it's because you have to cut. So to put that trigger on, you have to cut off this little... doop, doop, doop. I'm terrible at doing this in reverse. This little square back here has to get cut off. this little piece. So to cut that piece off, you just use a Dremel, and I suppose that, modifies the factory gun where you're cutting stuff off. USPSA, it doesn't seem to matter that you cut guns in a bunch of other ways, but that one maybe is just a bridge too far. So that's why they don't allow it. As far as the trigger itself, it feels fine. Shooting nicks just a little bit, and I have some friends that I find very credible that really, really like them. However, apparently Johnny Glocks dropped a video talking about it not being drop safe. Well, several videos. I had a bunch of people DM them to me. The one line I thought was funny was he says, I find no pleasure in that. But it's like, you look at his face, and it's like, what his face is showing doesn't really match the words he's saying, in my opinion. Maybe that's unkind of me to say, but I don't know. I think he has a little bit of a vested interest in that trigger not working, considering it's very adjustable, very light, and it's getting a lot of traction. A lot of people like it. So I'm not discounting the testing he's doing, and that it very well might be not drop safe, or there might be an issue with it. But for him to say specifically, I take no pleasure in this, normally people telling themselves, so I'm likely to believe the opposite of what he's telling me. For example, if I took a lot of effort trying to convince you that I never speed while I'm driving, not once. I never speed. I hate speeders. I think they're terrible people. I never speed. Let me give you more and more examples or reasons for why I've never driven over the speed limit. The first thing in your brain is going to be like, this guy speeds everywhere he goes. Of course. So for him to say, like, I take no pleasure in that, and then kind of saying the same thing over and over again, it's like, yeah, dude, you're loving every minute of this. But he might be right. I don't know. I know he's got more videos also showing the testing and that kind of stuff. That'll be, I don't know, interesting to see how that all shakes out. It seems like, well, the last time I remember anything with really where guns were being dropped or being an issue was kind of the first go round of people abandoning ship on the SIG P320s. For people, Pepperidge Farm remembers, for years ago, there was an issue with SIGs where they had a recall where if you dropped the gun, I don't remember the angle, but it was like maybe not this way it was fine, but maybe on this angle or something along those lines. Those guns were going off, and that was easy to recreate. And so they had a recall. That was one of the first times those guns had issues. I know there's been a few, but anyway, I don't know. I don't hear much about drop testing. It's not something I ever really pay much attention to, but the fact that, it does have a safety issue is obviously worth talking about. So anyway, I'm just going to run through these questions real quick, or try to just kind of briefly go through, since there was a bunch of questions. People asking if I've tried short stroking the Glock 17 spring to make it sprung like a 19. I haven't. I think there's a spacer out there that does that, but I have not done that. I've heard a lot of contradicting things on this. I've only shot my own Glock Gen 5, but it seems like you need to put a bit of pressure on the trigger. Is it enough improvement to go with an aftermarket? I was thinking maybe Glock performance, but I don't really want to have reliability problems. So this is a very good question. Something I think it's worth talking about. So yeah, the Glocks out of the box work really, really well. Normally, if a Glock has problems, it's because someone's messed with it. I'm just being real. Otherwise, if you just take the gun out of the box, don't even lubricate it, just take it straight to the range, hopefully change the sights or install a red dot. Other than that, the guns really are good to go. It's a fantastic product. So the question is it worth messing with? And it kind of depends. If it's a work gun, or maybe it's a gun that you won't get to clean often, or issue sourcing parts, it might make sense just to leave it factory. Just changing the striker spring alone and leaving everything else stock does lighten up the trigger pull again, but as I talked about, you can get into reliability issues with that too. You could just change the trigger shoe itself and leave everything else the same, just if you want a different shape to kind of put pressure on, whether you want a curved trigger or one that's more flat, or just depending on what you like. So maybe that route makes sense. Again, like this trigger, this is the tactical trigger. It just feels good as far as it hits my finger just right. I like pulling the trigger on Glocks kind of at that first joint in my finger, so it hits, like, it's easy to reach far enough forward to get on the trigger. Feel like I have a lot of control And with that flat face, I feel like it's really easy to press the trigger back straight. More so than with the factory trigger. So if that was something you wanted to experiment with, you could always keep all your gun internals the same and just change the trigger shoe. Like I said, you could just change the striker spring, or if you decide to change out the guts or any other parts, as long as you do what I would recommend, keep all the guns or all the parts for that specific pistol in a box, you can always go back to the way it was if you don't like it or you run into issues. But obviously, those things cost money, so it's not for everyone. The other question I got a bunch about was, after the Johnny Glock videos, was about the Johnny Glock trigger and the Timney Alpha. Firsthand, I've never used either one of them. I think I've dry fired a Johnny Glock trigger a few times. It was very light, but I have some friends that have used them in quantity of shooting. So over duration, everyone tells me those triggers fail. That's one of those triggers that if I dry fire it, because I remember messing with one and be like, this is pretty light. And once in a while when that happens, I'll be dry firing somebody's trigger, or like the double action shadows for people that's familiar. And you're kind of like, this thing feels good and it feels pretty light, but I don't know about this. Messing with those Johnny Glock triggers, or at least the one I messed with, I had that kind of sensation where I'm trying the trigger and I'm like, yeah, this is pretty light. This feels pretty good, but I don't know how long this thing is going to work. And sure enough, it seems like the Johnny Glock triggers don't. At least if you're a high volume shooter. I've been told those give up at some point. Ben was shooting at a mutual friend's place, pretty high round count days, and those were failing on him too. So I know Ben shares a similar view. The other one, the Timney Alpha, it seems like if you have a good one that works and you like it, good to go. Otherwise, there's a good amount of those that fail. So I know quite a few people that have been burnt with those and were just done, or maybe they sent it in for repair, got a new one, sold it, or put it in a box somewhere and done. So neither one of those would be one I'd be interested for me, just because if I buy a Glock, it's got to run 100%. So the Johnny Glock or the Timney Alpha is not anything I would be interested in personally, just because if it's like a teaching gun or a gun I'm going to travel with, I'll travel with two guns. But if it's kind of a known issue part, I just don't want to play the variables game. Otherwise, with whatever part you have, whether it's Johnny Glock, Alpha, the whatever Indy setup, if you have an Overwatch, you've had it for years and it's worked great, then just keep using it. Don't, just because of my 2 cents or my sample size of 1 or 2 has an issue, that doesn't mean you should sell what you have or get something different. I'm kind of just sharing my experience along the way. So it's my 2 cents, but if you have what you like, don't sell what you have, just to get something different. So anyway, I think that's enough talk about this. There'll be more videos coming with Glock parts and questions in the very near future. But appreciate you watching. Like, share, subscribe, all that crap if you want to. I appreciate you watching and have a good day.